count up here just in case. I can't be too eager because then they cut off the beginning. And, or
Mm-hmm.
if I'm too eager, sometimes I cut off too fast too. I hit the button, but this is great. Annual
Yeah, you guys in
tradition.
your soft opens now.
Yeah, well, except, we got to do the big open. By the way, the big open, it's preview. It's like secret content if you're on YouTube is going to be should we be worried about the Eagles offense? That's your big
Oh,
that's your big that's the cliffhanger.
oh Lord.
That's the cliffhanger. So I'll give you a few seconds to get the
Oh boy.
RPMs in your brain going for that one,
Sure.
and we will go. Should you be worried about the Eagles offense? That and more today on the couch. Original football guy, Jason Wood. No one knows better, and I know that you can sift out the emotional layer to this. Jason Wood, season ticket holder for the Eagles forever. Should we be worried about the Eagles offense?
Sigmund, my friend, you know how I am. I try very hard to separate being an effective fantasy analyst for our illustrious subscribers with my fandom, but in this case, this week left me apoplectic.
Ooh.
We had I know you're a fan of Warren Sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Warren puts out his annual tome, and I believe in 2018 and 2019, the Eagles, by his measure, were the most injured team in the league. And the way he measures it, I think, is snaps missed for projected starters. And, just basic mathematical regression says, well, we're due for a reasonably healthy year, but we are off to an awful start. No question about it. So, yes, I'm worried. Now, am I worried enough to dramatically reshape where I have players like Wentz and Miles Sanders? No, I'm not. But it's all the finer points, right? Like, for example, with Wentz, whereas I would have drafted him over Matt Ryan a week ago, I'll take Matt Ryan now if I happen to be in the market for a quarterback at that spot. With Miles Sanders, I would have taken him at the end of the first round quite happily before he was week to week. Now with that and the offensive line injuries, I probably I'd be happier taking him, let's say, with the 14th, 15th pick, because I've already got somebody else I feel is a little more secure. But yeah, I'm worried. I mean, listen, we last year ended on a very low note in terms of offensive production, and it looks to me like we're going to have essentially the same players on the field to start week one against Washington. Now, it helps that we're playing Washington in week one, right? I mean, no, I mean, it really does, right? I mean, by all accounts, Washington shouldn't be a very good team. So, for now, Deshaun Jackson is healthy. And we saw last year at week one, he looked like he was going to be a league winner, right? He 2 touchdowns,
Yeah.
So I suspect week one will be no problems. But in terms of their ability to hit their upsides, for the ability for Wentz to, say, have a surprise top 5 season, for the ability for Miles Sanders to push solidly into that every week top 10, yeah, how could I not be worried?
I'm going to take that clip and send it to Chase Young, by the way. And then everyone's going to say it's your fault that Carson
I
Wentz
didn't know
got
you
hurt.
rolled like that.
No, I'm just kidding. No, because the interesting test for Philly week one is going to be that offensive line against the 5 first-rounders up front, and then the worst back 7 in the league behind that. And, there's been that debate, Jason, like coverage or pressure, which one's more important. So Washington is like a laboratory experiment in that, and certainly Philadelphia in the offensive line. But I think you're right. It makes you less excited to take Eagles.
Right.
But that being said, Miles Sanders, I like how you said I'm not avoiding Miles Sanders. Maybe I'm looking at him on the back half of the turn instead of the front half of the turn, because the reason you were looking at Miles Sanders was, what was he, like the number 3 running back in the second half of the year last year? And that was with Boston Scott often getting 10, 12 touches. So it wasn't like Miles Sanders was getting some Pittsburgh Steelers feature back level role.
Right.
You mentioned Deshaun Jackson. He was already way too cheap. Jalen Reagor becomes a little cheaper, but you have to be really, it's a test of the rookie's ability to play through pain and through a limited range of motion. So, again, less exciting. What it all points to, Jason, what's funny is, in the storm, who's the shelter? Zach Ertz. Like, Zach Ertz is going to catch 100 balls this year. If you feel like things are going to get rough for the Eagles, that's a Zach Ertz season. Okay, we have to give actionable fantasy advice. That's what we do.
We do. That's what they tell us.
Yeah, and by the way, folks, I get to say this every year. I get to make Jason blush that, once upon a time, my good friend Rob Harling, in the year 2000, in our league, our office league, showed us this site, Football Guys, with the best message board. Before there was Twitter, there was the Shark Pool. It was the place to hang out and learn about football with people that were obsessive about football. And all we wanted was for David Dodds or Joe Bryant or Jason Wood or Bob Henry or Moral Tremblay or somebody with that official staff account to reply to something that we said. Even if y'all like trashed us, it was still like, wow, Jason Wood read what I wrote. So
And
it's
now
funny.
look, you
And
took
now,
that germ of an idea and became a megastar. Look at you.
well, I mean, I'm just happy that I get to eat and only have to talk about fantasy football and pay my rent. So I still feel very thankful.
I
Every year
guess
I get to do this.
I'm the usher to your Justin Bieber.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we can. This is like, what's funny is that I often talk about. We joked about this before we came on. The idea of doing other podcasts. Somebody, and I'm afraid I might be the person, needs to get everyone together while everyone's still of sound mind and alive and talking to each other, and do the oral history of fantasy football. Even though I wasn't there for the early years, but getting Paul Charchian and Bob Harris and Joe and David and everyone together, and even some of the people who've passed by the wayside, but still are part of the story. Because it is a fascinating story, and it continues to be a fascinating story. Anyway, the point is, we aren't here to say, well, maybe if, I don't know. And right now, as we speak, we have the fourth year running back stories that are developing. And hopefully they are resolved before the big weekend of drafts. And this might be the biggest weekend for fantasy drafts ever, because a lot of people move their drafts back just to make sure they were going to ride out any stormy seas before the draft. And
I have 8 and 7 days myself. I mean, I'm starting yesterday. I have eight drafts in 7 days.
Yeah, so this is it, and so we're having to draft with incomplete information, which we always are in a way. I mean, we're always making stands based on incomplete information. And first, I should say thank you, Chris Carson and Aaron Jones, for not making us worry as running backs going into the last year of their contract. But Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and we can treat them all together. We can talk about what the differences are. But folks, including you and me, are going to have to make decisions without knowing how these things are going to go. So what do we do? Attack this any way you want.
Sure. It's interesting. I mean, I would say that if you look at my rankings on the site or my projections, I don't seem to be very scared off by Mixon or Kamara. I have Kamara at 4, which I guess is consensus. I had him lower until I saw that he was healthy, because coming off of last year. But prior to this mini temper tantrum holdout, he was practicing in full and looked great. So I put him back to 4 and thought, okay, no, he's as safe as one can get as long as he's healthy. Mixon, I think just like you, I view him as an extremely talented player. I think one of the best pure runners in the game. I have questions about the love affair we have with Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow, just because we haven't seen it. I mean, I know that there's a lot of reasons why Zach Taylor's play calling last year wouldn't have borne a lot of fruit, but I can't just assume because we've got Joe Burrow that it's going to magically turn into Sean McVay. But I was fine with Mixon. The only one I was off was Dalvin Cook, and that's because I guess I don't know what the opposite of a truther is. Is it a denier? I was a Dalvin Cook denier from jump last year. That hurt me. But I keep sticking to it. I know injury prone is something that makes Gene cringe, but listen, Dalvin Cook has not 1, not 2, but 3 shoulder surgeries in his life already, and a torn ACL. I just don't trust it. So he's not in my first round. That's probably my most controversial ranking. So Cook is the side for me. I haven't been on Cook from the start. I wouldn't take him at 5 like most people would. But as to the others, I have to think that Kamara, he seems like a real good dude. He was in camp this whole time. I have a feeling either the Saints are going to come to terms with him or he'll play. I just have trouble, and it's just a gut feeling. I don't have any hard data. It's not like Schefter's calling me with the inside scoop here. So I'm going to assume Kamara plays, and I'd still draft him if I was picking in the middle of the first round and he was there. Mixon scares me a little bit just because, again, migraines. I don't know that we can speak to his character as a human being as much as we can Kamara based on what we knew of his college life. And I know people can change, but I'm just saying I don't know that I can bank on him being a good person. And like I said, I'm not as confident that the Bengals offense is going to be something we're going to be happy to have a piece of. So long-winded answer, I'm fine with Kamara where he's going to go. I probably would bump 1 or 2 players over Mixon in that miasma of starting running backs that go at that end point of the first round, early second. And then, and then Cook I'm off just because he'll be long gone before I take him.
So first Cook, and this occurred to me while I was doing a show yesterday or the day before or something, that you can draw this wonderful circle, Jason, that's like Cook and his injury concerns are being downplayed in the fantasy community for him to be still 5th, 6th in drafts. And
Right.
chances are the reason the Vikings are hesitant to give him a bunch of guaranteed money is because of his injury history,
Sure.
which then triggers everyone to be worried about his contract. And it's really, and I know some people out there are saying, but Cook's been practicing and said he's looking forward to week one. The one Adam Schefter himself, you mentioned him already, said, I would not draft Cook if he doesn't have a new contract to begin the season. And I mean, it's Adam Schefter. You can't
Right.
just brush that off. And I'm going to have Paul Charchian, king of all things Minnesota,
Sure.
on the show tomorrow to get his take, and he's
Mhm.
usually tapped in. And let me put it this way: I'm having Paul on the show tomorrow because I think there's something to talk about. I don't
Yeah.
think there's nothing to talk about. But so it makes this big circle where if the Vikings are concerned about his injury history, and then that's causing this contract issue, that's giving fantasy players pause, which they should have had anyway because of the injury history.
Mhm.
So I agree with you on Cook, and if people are asking me today, like I was so close to moving Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Can we say Clyde Edwards-Helaire? You're saying tap the brakes on Burrow and the Bengals offense. Are you tapping the brakes at all on Edwards-Helaire, like top 7, 8 pick?
No, it's interesting. I was on Pat Fitzmaurice's podcast the other day, and he asked me about Edwards-Helaire in the context of why are you down on him, and I laughed because I have him 9th at running back and 13th overall, and I didn't view that as being particularly down on him. I mean, I'm taking a rookie and saying he's going to be a must-start top 10 player, but as you alluded, because of everything else that's happening and the momentum of the potential upside. I mean, he has number 1 running back upside, or at least number 2 if you consider McCaffrey being in his own tier. I guess if you follow my rankings to the T, you won't end up with Edwards-Helaire at this point. Now, I would have no problem taking him. In fact, last night in a draft, I took him with the 7th pick. So, I'm fine with where he's going. And certainly I think with what's happened with Miles Sanders and Mixon, again, very much on the fringe, it's probably pushed me to be more comfortable if I have the 7 or 8 to take him there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was this close to moving Edwards-Helaire ahead of Cook in my rankings, and I may go back and do it anyway, just because it's stable, strangely, even though it's rookie, because you're putting your chip with the Chiefs' offense. And
go ahead.
Just in a role that Damian Williams turned into running back 1 production.
For sure.
So if Damian Williams can do it, I'm okay with Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah. What I was going to say was the thing I struggle with these faux holdouts or tantrums that we're seeing the last few days is, we know for a fact that not many players are, let's say, very fiscally responsible. And these are guys playing on their rookie contracts. And I keep seeing these headlines like, oh, Alvin Kamara is playing for only $2.2 million this year. Well, number one, $2.2 million is a tremendous amount of money in the real world. Number two, $2.2 million is still a big chunk of his rookie contract. And then I think with COVID, and we know that the salary cap's going to have a massive hit next year, I know these guys are very nervous about if they don't get their deal now, are they going to get their deal? But at the same time, if they hold out and sit out this year and don't get their money at all, then what happens the following year? So I lean towards being that most holdouts are just sound and fury signifying nothing, because at the end of the day, most people can't and won't say no to multiple millions of dollars on principle.
So it's a good jumping off point. We could do the whole show on this because I think there's so many shades of gray and layers to it. But I think you're right to start at a default of fade the holdout. And for the longest time, I think we got more concerned about the holdout would then cause the conditioning maybe to not be up to the typical levels, and then you might see some early season injuries. But really, fade the holdout worked over most of the time we've been doing fantasy football.
Until
Le'Veon Bell, right? And Le'Veon Bell, it was emotional shockwave through the industry in the sense that the people that depend on us to give advice, I don't think there was anybody saying take the holdout seriously at the time. Because he had a holdout the year before and showed up and it was fade the holdout. And then Le'Veon Bell showed, no, here's a case where somebody is willing to sit out the year. Now, one might argue that the football god said, well, here, you get to play with Adam Gase now as your reward.
Right.
Maybe karma is at play there or something like that. But then that made us have to pause and say, well, I have to at least consider taking the holdout seriously. Another layer to this is the new CBA. Another layer to this, though, is, as you said, in these times, players might be looking at getting that bag, that one contract, especially a running back, as something that there's a lot more urgency to do than there was last year at this time. The other thing about the Bell issue is that I think the Bell issue stands for if a player sits out the season, then the team is probably going to say, fine, we're not going to keep you on a technicality. If you want to end our relationship that way, that's how our relationship will end. And, so if Kamara sits out the season, if Cook sits out the season, if Mixon sits out the season, I don't think the teams are going to bring them back and try to replay this whole thing. I think that they'll at least preserve their health for next year in terms of football injuries, although they could get COVID. Maybe they're more likely to get COVID if they're not concentrating on football. There's a whole other layer there. But stepping through each of these individually, the Saints know that it's now or never. I think the Saints are going to get something done with Kamara.
Agreed.
Even if it's something like the Raheem Mostert, like here, or Melvin Ingram.
I just think like a 2-year, $20 million guaranteed number gets it done. He's happy. He's got life-changing wealth if COVID and the salary cap are screwed up next year. Like you said, the window is now for them. They're a legit Super Bowl contender. And Breeze can't play till he's 50. Yeah,
exactly. I think it's just they're that one's unique. Cook, I mean, we do have the report from like 2 months ago that said he's not going to play if he doesn't have a contract extension. We saw the Vikings have the contract extension money and use it to sign Ngakoue.
It's a great point. Yeah.
So that,
and to your point, Schefter, who isn't a fantasy guy, as we know, but is as plugged in, let's say the most plugged in football insider on the earth, like you said, specifically said, I would not draft him in my fantasy league. So, we'll see if that's predictive, but I found it interesting.
Yeah. And by the way, as far as like declarative statements or actionable advice, I'll say this. I'm not going to make any absolutes and say like what Adam Schefter did. But I will say this. If you have any hesitation or pause at all, then don't draft them. I mean, it's easy because there's plenty of, take Devontae Adams instead if you don't like the running backs, take
Michael Thomas.
Take Michael Thomas. I'm fine with saying I'm not going to take them because of the holdout. The most worrisome, I think, is Mixon because of the migraines. Because I don't remember which beat writer it was for the Bengals that actually used the quotes around migraines.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Because Cordy Glenn, and look, I don't have any firsthand information about Cordy Glenn, okay? But Cordy Glenn had headaches and different. The thing about headaches is that you can't disprove them, right? You can't say to someone, "No, you're not having headaches." And there's a sensitivity about concussions, CTE.
Percy Harvin, right? I mean, it was always people thought he was just being a diva for a while, but then it was so consistent at such inopportune times. I think finally people thought, no, this has got to be real. This guy's got them.
So, but we are agnostic about whether it's true or not. And then seeing the quotes, and then I think there was a tweet that was worded, the plan is for him to play week 1. Well, yeah, of course.
Right.
I mean,
that's
an odd thing to say.
Yeah.
The Bengals did finally open the pocketbook this offseason for free agents. It's a new age. It's a new era. And this is why, if you want me to talk you into taking Joe Mixon, it's because, and I agree that, look, if we're being sober and level-headed about it, Joe Burrow is a rookie, and it's probably with offensive line going to be under. I got carried away with Kyler Murray last year. However, I'm back in with Burrow, just because. Look,
I love it, Sig.
I mean, first of all, I think one of the best things about fantasy football is you get to share in true capital G greatness.
Yes.
And whenever you see something coming before other people, or it's going to be the wave's going to be higher when it gets to the shore than everyone thinks, you get to surf that wave. It's awesome. And Joe Burrow, at least from indications, let me put it this way, Wood. If you were going to say Joe Burrow is going to be special from day one, this is how you'd write the opening scene, right? Every report out of Bengals camp is he's the runaway MVP of camp. He's carrying himself in a way that is exactly what they wanted as far as a transformational figure. Like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, someone who just comes in. It's like, wow, I'm in the building with this guy. I better take this seriously. And he's already playing the game within the game. He's not even imposed or anything by being a rookie in a camp with all these veterans. He's the leader of the team, and he's working on his craft. So,
if I may just clarify, I mean, that one of the things that is really different from the way I think of fantasy and the way that, say, you and Wildman do is that I guess I'm an empiricist. I struggle with projecting greatness before I see it, and I'm not saying that's always right. It can hurt me. Similarly, sometimes you can get overhyped about young players before and it doesn't work out. My point is we all have our peccadillos, our flaws. So for me, when I say I don't know about Zach Taylor and Joe Mixon, and Joe Burrow, I'm not saying they can't be an amazing story this year. All I'm saying is that I haven't seen it, and so I'm less likely on draft day to buy into it. I won't be at all surprised if by the end of the year, Burrow is the new it boy, and the next guy we know is going to be a 10-year fixture as one of the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks in the league, and Zach Taylor's on the rise as a hot young coach. I don't. That is well within the realm of possibility. I'm just saying that relative to your question about Mixon, I just don't know that I can count on it. I would be equally unsurprised if the Bengals are a train wreck because Taylor's not a very good play caller and not a very good coach, and they're not quite sure what they have with Burrow until they get a new coach or a new play caller in there. So,
yeah, absolutely. And look, because of the offensive line and Burrow and his ability to play in the eye of the storm, I mean, he may just get blindsided because he's going to be the opposite of Daniel Jones in a way that he has that greater awareness about him, but he played behind a terrific offensive line at LSU last year.
Oh yeah,
and it's just going to be different. It's going to be different from day
best
one.
college team I've ever seen for the record.
Oh yeah, best college offense. It makes us excited to see Joe Brady's offense in Carolina to an extent. If you want to split the difference, just take Tyler Boyd because it's minus 6th, 7th round pick.
You know what? It's funny because when the reports about AJ Green being back again and healthy, and you and I have fallen into the AJ Green trap too many times to count, and then T. Higgins, I thought, I'm like, okay, Tyler Boyd's been good. He's never been great. Maybe he just kind of gets shuffled off to Buffalo, and we're kind of like, he's just a guy that you have on your roster, and you just don't feel great about starting him most weeks. But like you said, the way the chips fall, here we are in the peak of draft season, and Tyler Boyd is a guy I think I'm targeting this week because AJ Green it seems like same old AJ Green, and I know it's theoretically fine and all that, but hammies scare me to death, and by all accounts, T. Higgins has done nothing to impress and will be just a rotational guy, at least for the first part of the season. So,
and Boyd is in the Justin Jefferson role. Boyd is in the role where as Burrow extends the play or as the play goes off script a little bit,
right.
Boyd's going to be they're going to have the mind meld. Boyd could be. I put him in the 25 players that could make your draft.
Right. Yeah.
Put out yesterday because it's not at all insane to think of him as like a 100-catch player or a 1,400 yard guy. I'm not saying it's the most likely outcome. I'm saying it's just within the range of outcomes. Just because of what you point out, like fragility of AJ Green and John Ross and T. Higgins already banged up. Don't forget about Auden Tate. But the Mixon thing, just to wrap that up, is it's just exciting to think about Mixon in at least an average offense.
Yes,
what I mean?
Right. No, absolutely.
An average offense.
Yeah.
And we know that he has the durability. Like his best football is always in December. I mean, how many times did we say that about a lead running back who touches the ball like 300 times in a season?
Yeah,
they look the best in December. So even on these terrible teams, he's looked the best in December. What can he do in a good offense? But again, elusive, understanding exactly what's going on here. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I've always struggled with offensive line analysis because it's so difficult to quantify, right? And we have a great guy on staff, Matt Batanti, who does a great job. I think as good a job as you can in evaluating offensive line, but I've always struggled with it. And you talk about OG status. I remember the year that LaDainian Tomlinson was coming in as a rookie. And I just remember vehement declarations that you couldn't draft Tomlinson because the Chargers were a terrible team with the league's worst offensive line.
Right.
And if you match player to player at the time, that certainly was an argument to be made. They didn't have a very good offensive line. And we know what Tomlinson did as a rookie. And I'm not saying that happens every time, but it is a reminder that just like with transcendent players at other positions being able to elevate a unit, a transcendent running back that has vision and patience and balance and strength can very much make a line look a tier better by himself. So my point is I don't think the Bengals are going to have a great offensive line, but I think we've already seen that Joe Mixon on a talent level can be highly productive even with subpar line play.
Yeah, and maybe again the quality of the offense in general lifts the offensive line, but
sure.
We'll see. We had a big story we woke up to yesterday, cracked open the brain, the adrenaline flowing, Woodrow. But we could look at the Leonard Fournette release as something important, something to get your pencil out from over your ear like Matt Patricia and get down and figure out what the right answer is. Or it may well be that the right answer is that all this means is a bunch of players you can put a line through on your sheet, including Leonard Fournette.
Hmm.
What are you thinking about here? What's the takeaway? There's a lot of division in the fantasy world. Some people think Fournette's going to bounce back. Some people think this is a reason to leave him for dead. Some people are looking at the Jacksonville running backs for value. Some people are saying leave them alone. And then the whole question of when and where will he sign? Where's the good cut here in the story?
Yeah, wasn't particularly surprised he was waived, right? We knew this was a possibility. I think the timing threw us off a bit, but before last year, they had removed all of his guarantees because of some of the shenanigans he had gotten up to the year before and off-season stuff. So they had no financial incentive to keep him around if they didn't want him. I think it's a character assassination for him with a team that's with where they are and a new offensive coordinator that basically the response was we tried to trade him. We literally couldn't get a 7th rounder for him. And he just wasn't worth keeping around because of work ethic. And that's a condemnation because I understand the team is going to likely be very bad this year. But Fournette is playing for his life-changing payday. I mean, if this would be the year where if he has a great year, likely not with Jacksonville, some other team signs him to a $20-30 million deal, and he's hopefully set for life. So to not have the work ethic, or at least not impress your coaches enough to stick around under that auspice, is concerning to me. Now, that said, as much as I think he's a bit of a knucklehead, I do think he's a talented player, certainly in the right usage, right? I mean, on first and second down as a pure runner, I think he's second in the league in the last 3 years in broken tackles. So the dude can play. I mean, he can absolutely play. So, of course, somebody's going to sign him. If I were Fournette's agent, I would say don't sign right now. Let's wait for a week or two. Some team will have a major injury, and that's where you're going to sign because you'll have leverage. I think that makes the most sense for him. Now, will he take that advice, or will he be so scared about not having a paycheck he'll sign somewhere? I don't know. We'll find out soon enough, I'm sure. So I'll hold off on reacting to what to make of Fournette until we see where he lands. If you're drafting today, I would take him. I think I have him ranked 42nd. I would take him as my RB4 if I felt really good about my top 3 and thought they could all start for me. Why not? I mean, I based on where he's going versus everyone else going in that tier are straight pure backups that need an injury to play. So why not? I have no problem with that. In terms of Jacksonville, yeah, I think even we on Football Guys are pretty big house divided here. How this all plays out. I think there's no way you can look at what's happened with that franchise in the last 6 months and not say they are trying to be the worst franchise in football. They have summarily jettisoned every high-priced player. Some probably were overpaid, but some certainly were fairly paid. They have jettisoned every high-priced player, Ngakoue and Fournette being the last two. They kept a lame duck coach that had people's jaws on the floor. They kept him around. They brought in a new play caller who was fired mid-season because he was a bad play caller from his last team. And Shad Khan and his son have other things, right? They own a soccer team. They have a new wrestling promotion that they're spending a ton of time on. I mean, Shad's son is supposed to be the vice president of operations for the Jaguars. Well, Tony Khan spends every waking minute running AEW wrestling. So I just think this is a team that wants to tank. I think they very much want to move to London. I think they're very much hoping they land Trevor Lawrence, who is a generational, transcendent, can't miss quarterback talent a la Peyton Manning. So I just think this is a really bad team. And, Sigmund, you're often one on your show or the Audible to say you want to own pieces. You want to come away from your draft with pieces of great offenses. Well, the corollary is that you want to stay clear of getting a lot of pieces of really bad offenses. So I'm just totally off the Jaguars with one caveat, DJ Chark, because we saw that Chark is an exceptional player under really bad circumstances. So I have no reason to think that he doesn't have a 65, 70 catch, 1,000-yard floor if healthy. So I'm fine with Chark. In fact, I still think he's going a little too late. So he's a guy that I do end up targeting. I took him last night, for example. But everybody else, I got no love for it. I have nothing against Raekwon Armstead. In Best Buy, in bust ball drafts all summer long, I have a ton of Armstead because he was being drafted in the last few rounds as a clear backup. So, lucky for me. But now where he's going, no interest at all. Armstead missed practice again yesterday. He missed 3 weeks of camp with COVID. He comes back and he's already missing practice. I want no part of him.
Yeah, that's fair. And that's where I'll say Divine Ozigbo. And we'll see. We'll see. He may get the first opportunity out of the gate. I think he's got a little more all-around game than Armstead. Armstead's got a little more long speed. Chris Thompson is there to give you 10 to 15 points until he gets hurt. Which actually, it's actually...
Chris Thompson truthers crack me up.
Well, look, if you're doing like Woodrow, let's say you're doing like a high-stakes contest, right?
Sure.
And you have your like number one running back you take in the first round. Maybe you can draw the first pick and get Christian McCaffrey. And then you don't take another running back until like the 8th round. And you start taking guys like Antonio Gibson and Leonard Fournette and Latavius Murray and Giovanni Bernard. Chris Thompson can be the guy who holds the fort down while you wait for one of those guys to hit. And then if you do get a hit, J.K. Dobbins, if you do get a hit from that ragtag group, and that 4 or 5 weeks that Thompson gives you 10 to 15 points in a PPR league until he gets hurt can be important. So, I don't want to just brush him aside.
No, I know. He's 30 years old, though. He's missed, I think, over 50 games in his career. And I mean, I don't have the numbers handy because we're live here, but I'm pretty sure he has never finished above RB 36 in a season. No. So, I mean, like, it's fine.
Oh, I get it. I mean, he cost you a 17th, 18th round pick. I just laid out the one draft plan that I think that he fits in. And KGB, who's always an excellent part of our community here, saying getting Laviska in the backfield would be fun. And I again, 15th round pick or 12th round pick. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, as you know, but I'm sure your listeners don't. There are 2 college football teams that I've always rooted for: the Colorado Buffs, which has been a rough go for a long time, and Louisville, who again sometimes good, sometimes bad. But either way, those are my college teams. So I love Laviska. I think if Laviska was a durable dude, he could do it all. Literally, I mean, I think he could be a Brandon Marshall type of player in terms of talent. Absolutely. But he's banged up again already. I mean, the guy, he missed 9 games in college. He was hobbled for 5 or 6 others. And I know I can hear Gene in the background saying injury prone is overrated, but he's already banged up. Yeah. So I can't get excited about the number 2 receiver on a very bad offense who's already banged up as a rookie in the COVID era. Maybe he'll be great. And if he's on waivers, I'll happily pick him up because I want him to be a wild success in the league, but I'm just not expecting it this year.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's fair that I think they're just some guys, and even Dr. Gene will say there are some players that it happens like Will Fuller. I mean, it's okay to say Will Fuller is injury prone.
Right.
And with Shenault, it's just he might. I call it wow and tight. Like some of these guys, just their physiology, their musculature, the way they're pushing themselves to the edge, their body just doesn't cooperate with them. So we'll see about Shenault. He's exciting and 100% co-signed on DJ Chark. Go back and look, folks. First half of the year, he was on pace for like 1,400 yards, double-digit touchdowns. And then the Jaguars fell apart, which goes back to your original point about the Jags being, I call them the weekend at Bernie's franchise. And I think there are some Jacksonville fans, like Eric Stoner's texting with me early this morning. I love Jacksonville fan. Jacksonville fan base has given us some of the best football personalities in our football virtual
world. For sure.
I could give shout outs to so many people here right now, but you all, I love you. But I just love that you mentioned like the conspiracy theory layer of this to understand what's happening with Jacksonville, because I think that a lot of people who consider themselves very up on football don't know about this layer to Jacksonville where the owner just doesn't really want to be the owner. I mean, he doesn't care. It's like the neglected child. He just doesn't care about the team. And what I understand, the reason that is Doug Marrone still the head coach? How is Caldwell still the GM? It's because they don't want to run the team. They don't want to put the work in to find someone else to be in some Tom Coughlin King Emperor kind of role. And it's like Major League. Now in Major League, the bunch of rejects and losers actually, they make it kind of fun. So maybe that's Gardner Minshew's destiny, but that's what you're asking for this team this year. So I'm just glad that you put that front and center. Sure. You can find a lot of good Jags conspiracy series stuff.
Can I just put a cap on this discussion and we'll leave it in the air for people to react to and then argue with me on Twitter.
Sure.
I think that one of the greatest fantasy myths that we have to stop espousing like it's gospel is the idea that garbage time equals fantasy stardom. I see it all the time. We had a conversation with fellow staff yesterday, and I was 3 of you said to me, not you specifically, 3 staff said to me, but Minshew in the passing game, it's going to be on fire because garbage time. Listen, garbage time, all that means, right, is game script. It means you're forced into throwing the ball. But this is the NFL. Jay Gruden, as I pointed out yesterday, Jay Gruden threw the ball. He loves to throw the ball. Yes, he does. However, in spite of having a nearly 60-40 pass-run ratio as a play caller in the NFL, his offenses have averaged 19th in pass attempts. 19th. Why? Because his teams are terrible. Right. So he wants to throw, but because he's forced to throw, and he probably throws more than he should either way, his teams don't move the ball. They don't score points. They don't stay on the field. So you need to be a really efficient team and also a pretty good team to be able to be up at the top of passer attempts most of the time. Now, I know there are plenty of examples because nothing is absolute in the NFL. There are examples of teams that throw 650 times and they're not very good, a la the Detroit Lions with Matthew Stafford. It can happen, but there's no evidence in 9 years as a play caller that Jay Gruden is that guy. Like, Jay Gruden is not, I'm going to throw 700 times no matter what. Doug Marrone isn't going to allow that to happen. So I just don't, I'm not saying garbage time isn't a factor. I'm saying that I see so many people just lazily say, like, oh, they're going to be terrible, so garbage time means they're going to be awesome. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. Perfect example, Kyler Murray last year. The argument I heard many of you espouse with Kyler Murray was like, rookie, untethered, wide open offense, pace of play is going to be great. He's going to be dynamic because they're going to throw the ball like crazy. Well, interestingly enough, I'm fully on board with the Kyler Murray train this year. I think he's in my top 6. So I'm fully convinced the kid's going to be a star now. But last year, my point was, you don't know that that's going to happen. And it didn't, because again, Kingsbury wants to play with this very fast pace of play, but they were a bad team, terrible defense. They didn't have a really good running game for most of the season. And what happened? Well, Kyler Murray was effective, but he was the 16th best fantasy quarterback. Not because he can't play, but because they didn't have enough attempts for him to put up big numbers. So that's all I'm saying. Like, people need to slow the roll on this garbage time equals fantasy stardom. That's not true. It's patently false.
Yeah, there's subtleties or nuances to it, right?
Yes.
Run defense is important because the defense, even in garbage time, has to get off the field.
Correct.
For the offense to have chances.
Exactly.
And Jacksonville, well, they traded away Calais Campbell, and they traded away Yannick Ngakoue, and they traded away AJ Boye, and Joe Schobert's going to be great in IDP leagues. So that's a problem. I wonder, just as a quick aside, as I'm so excited, I'm so hot to trot for the Dallas offense. Dallas run defense could be a problem because it just makes sense to try to shorten the game against the Cowboys anyway. They lose Gerald McCoy. May Dontari Poe stay healthy because their pass rush looks like it's going to be just fine on the edge, but they have penetrators inside, young guys, Tristan Hill and Neville Gallimore, but they don't have other run stuffers. And so anyway,
that's their Achilles heel theoretically. I agree, but I'm as much as it pains me to say, as a lifelong Eagles fan and season ticket holder, I am 100% aboard the Dallas Cowboy train this year. I think it would be a gross disappointment if they don't at least make a legitimate run to the Super Bowl. I do think they have depth that few teams have at almost every position now. And look, CeeDee Lamb, I just got said I'm an empiricist, but I'm all aboard CeeDee Lamb because he was my favorite. Hold on, I lost you, Sig.
Yeah, he's still here.
Okay, 1 second. There we are. CeeDee Lamb was my favorite receiver for dynasty drafts. I was crushed that the Eagles didn't get him. I wanted them to make moves to make sure they got him. And look, certainly we're at a point where beat writers are prone to saying nice things about players, but as you know, I handle the training camp stuff for the NFC East, and it's just, you can't make it up, right? The Dallas Cowboys staff writers put out a piece this week ranking the 10 receivers on the 80-man roster, 1 through 10. Now, it sucks if you're the number 10 guy. That's going to hurt to see that in an article. But the top three, we know who they were, but the order was interesting. Michael Gallup was third. Amari Cooper and his $80 million contract was second, and CeeDee Lamb was ranked by the staff's own reporters as the number 1 receiver in camp. And I think they're all going to play. I think they're going to be a little maddening, at least to start the season, because all three are going to have moments. There's going to be weeks where one of them doesn't do much at all, the other two ball out. But I think that, how that is, that balances out over the season. Someone gets hurt for a week or two. So I think you're going to want to own a piece or multiple pieces of the Cowboys offense. And I would gladly, just before you ask, I would gladly draft any of those 3 receivers. In fact, I actively draft at least one of them if I can.
Yeah, more than one's fine. And Lamb still somehow is the cheapest, but it wouldn't be surprising if he's the most productive. All the reports, what you described was the punctuation mark on a summer of reports, that they're just giddy There's just, I mean, they're just, how did we get this guy? Like, he's everything
Yeah.
they wanted him to be. He's a really fun player to watch too, kind of unorthodox in his game. He doesn't, it's hard to compare him to anybody, which is a wonderful thing because he can win in any way you ask him to win. So yeah, CD Lamb, and I don't know if you heard Cecil last week. He said, however high you're drafting Jerry Jeudy, it's not high enough. So
I did hear that, and that pleases me greatly because I'm not a huge Cortland Sutton guy. I don't think he's being like grossly overdrafted, but I'm not. I actually think Denver, if Drew, I saw Cecil had a little breaking YouTube video yesterday, the day before, saying things aren't looking so good in camp the last few days with Drew Lock. That would be a shame if Drew Lock can't put it together because I think Jeudy is the 1 and Sutton is the 2 or the 1B is very compelling, right? I think that, I mean, they have the makings of a fairly explosive, potent offense for years to come if they can get a quarterback in there.
Yeah, exactly. And this is coming along with Locke, but there's a reason he was a second round pick. KGB says he wants to yell Blake Jarwin's name, and I agree with that. By the way.
Sure.
I've been the Blake Jarwin defender from like months ago. Come on, he's the number 5 option. He's a nobody with no college pedigree, etc. But he's going to be the guy that the defense says, well, if Blake Jarwin beats us, Blake Jarwin's going to beat us.
Yeah,
and he's going to beat us. And Mike McCarthy himself said the shortest path to the end zone is that post route.
That's right. Well, once he said that, I think that's when Jarwin's ADP started rising.
Yep, Mike McCarthy himself. Okay. There's so many different layers here, but I want to give you an open-ended question or two so people can know what's coming straight from the mind here. Give me a name that a month ago you probably weren't drafting, but now you're at least considering, if not drafting every time.
Yeah, I mean, the first one, and we mentioned him already, is Tyler Boyd, right? I mean, he was just not on my radar in the million mocks that we do and all of the best balls. I came away with 0 shares of him. Now I find myself targeting him. Another player, I'll just go by position. Matt Ryan at quarterback, and that's again a bit of a pivot because I'm fine theoretically with taking Mahomes or Jackson, depending on your league. But you have to know your league. If you're in a league with a bunch of sharks and you know the quarterbacks aren't going to be overinflated, and you can get either of those guys in the 3rd round, like I'm fine with that. So I have no issue with the higher quarterbacks. But generally speaking, I think we all like to wait if we can. And Wentz was kind of one of my guys. He was like, okay, I think Wentz is going to be right there with the Russ Wilson, Kyler Murray year-end points, at least on a per-game basis. But now I find myself kind of pivoting to Matt Ryan in that role, in that, like, I want to make sure I get a quarterback I legit think is a top 12 guy, and it's usually him or
who's
Brady.
Not 40 years old.
Yeah, Brady's the other guy, but he's 40, right? So Matt Ryan at quarterback. At running back, I'd say that the one that's probably changed for me is I'm trying to think if there is someone. I'm just thinking through
Antonio Gibson, anyone from Washington, anyone from New England, like
no, because I mean, the thing is, I was on the Damian Harris train very early. I was taking him as my last running back in a ton of leagues. So now his ADP's creeped up. So no to him. Nothing really comes to mind there. Like, in fact, probably the other way. Like, I was pretty high on Darrell Henderson, but I've had to fade that because he's banged up again. I was, like I said, I was taking Reichel Armstead, but now his ADP is too high. So I'll have to pause on the running back. I have to think about it. But then, and then at tight end, I'm the flag bearer for the TJ Hawkinson train this year. But I have to say that in leagues where people know me and are taking Hawkinson early and I miss him, I have warmed up to Mike Gesicki. I was kind of like, Gesicki's just a glorified receiver in a bad offense. I don't see it, but I went back and looked, and it did seem like a light switch went on last year, and it does seem like Fitzpatrick is going to be the starter. And I'm putting aside, I know he's dealing with a family issue right now, but assuming he's back and playing for week 1, I think Fitzpatrick and Gesicki, I'm okay with that. Like, I think tight end is a train wreck this year outside of those top 2 guys, and even Kittle's worries me because of his snap count and he's injured. But I think tight end is just so hard to. Like last year, we all had our guys at tight end. Like you either like Mark Andrews or Darren Waller. If you got one of those 2, you were set. I just don't. I'm not sure there is one this year. And so for me, if I don't get Hawkinson, I'm finding myself getting Gesicki a lot.
Yeah, Gesicki is like. I think that folks have overlooked that the Miami pass offense was. I've cited this stat like every time I do a show for the last week. 2,300 pass yards plus in the last 8 games of the season. The offense was just an absolute mess in the first half of the season. Second half of the season, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and isn't it a joy to have him back? And condolences to him. I know he's having to deal with the death of his mother. So I want to make sure to, temper that enthusiasm with the reality for him. But Preston Williams is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Devontae Parker's been on the bike for the last week, and I was taking a lot of Devontae
Yeah,
Parker.
no, for sure.
I'm getting scared now. Maybe it was all just a dream, 2019. But
Mm-hmm.
either way, with the opt-outs of Wilson and Hearns, then I guess he's looking really good. It's basically the slot receiver.
Yeah, I've got 2 running backs for you now. I just have to take a look at mine.
Good.
One, I have to give credit to Wildman, because he and I were chatting about it, and he kind of got me to relook at the situation, and that's James Conner in Pittsburgh, your boy Yinzer. I just was not interested. It just seemed like there were other backs I liked in that tier. I didn't necessarily dislike him intensely, but I just thought, had a bad year last year. He was banged up. I just don't know what they're going to make of him. But what Waldman said, go back and look at what he did the year before.
Yep.
The innate skill set is there. The competition is not legitimate. McFarland and Snell are not legitimate threats. At least they shouldn't be. And it looks, and again, we're basing this on a lot of hearsay, but it looks like Ben Roethlisberger is healthy and actually doesn't have a gut this year. So maybe he's going to play with a chip on his shoulder. So my point is I am finding myself happily taking Conner as my second running back now the last few weeks. So he's a big change. And then the other one is a rookie, Jonathan Taylor. I think, how can you question his collegiate pedigree? But I just thought that the Colts would be one of those teams that would see no problem with mixing he and Mac in pretty liberally. And maybe that will be how it plays out. But once Mac came out and kind of had that look on his face and said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but he essentially said, Taylor's that guy. I don't, I just got the vibe that Mac knows that if they go to plan, he's going to be the backup because Taylor's just that special. And I thought, okay, you know what? Taylor might not be help me win in the first month, but cream rises to the top. He's a special kid, and I'd probably be more mad at myself for passing on him than having him on my bench. And then if I make the playoffs, he's the stud and he carries me to a championship. So those are the 2 guys I was fading, say, a month ago, but I'm now actively targeting.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor is one of the players that if you are agnostic or ignoring training camp buzz on a player like Jonathan Taylor, then you're going to be hurt by that. If not this time around, Taylor eventually. Because again, everything, if you were going to write a story that Jonathan Taylor is, let's say, the next Derrick Henry, this is how the story starts.
Yes.
Everybody is
well said. Mm-hmm.
gushing about the guy. And even Marlon Mack in his Zoom call, when they were asking about it, sounded like a defeated man.
That's what I'm alluding to, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's all inexact and, we're gossiping and things like that, but that's what we do. And it's intuition. Your intuition is not mysterious. It's not mystical. It's not supernatural. It's just everything that you've learned and experienced in your life coming out in a quote unquote gut feeling. And when you're watching Marlon Mack, you just feel like that guy knows that he's not going to be the guy sooner or later. And it's too bad because he's improved every year of his career. He's going to get paid more than Leonard Fournette next year. I would feel more comfortable giving him the Jordan Howard contract than Leonard Fournette.
That's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
And, it's going to be a wild free agent period. But Taylor, taking Taylor in the 3rd round is one of the things that makes fantasy football fun.
Yes, that's true.
And Connor, the other answer to the running back 2 conundrum, as running back 2s have just lost value, just hemorrhaged value over the course of the last month or so. It's simple. I mean, it's basically just, can he stay healthy? If he can stay healthy, he's going to return first, early second round value. Second round, by the way, is where he's going sometimes. I think that if you're doing high stakes drafts now, is where
yeah. And again, I mean, everything we say, I think is a given. It's relative and based on your league, right? I mean, when I say I'm happily taking James, it's because he's going where I see him as valued, which is really around what his ADP had been. If a lot of these players, it's interesting. I mean, we do, as a staff, we do this feature, and we do it in June where we do overvalued, undervalued, and sleeper. And then we redo it in August. And I'm sure this happens to you too, Sig, but so many of my sleeper picks I can't reuse because from June to August, they've moved up enough where they're no longer eligible. And that's not a humble brag. I'm just saying, that's the way the NFL is. Once people start seeing the forest for the trees and piecing things together, these guys move a lot. And so a guy that you may have been thrilled, like Raquel Armstead, I'm thrilled that I have him on 25 best ball teams because he cost me a 18th round pick, back in June. But now would I take him as my 3rd running back? No, I would not. So it's just all about relativism.
It is. Your mileage may vary. And just to put a final bow before we go off the rails here, on your talk about the Cowboys, when I clear my brain, and I did this yesterday with Chris Allen, so I'll do it with you. Nice. When I clear my brain and I just think 2020 won the Super Bowl, whatever number we're up to now, 50 something. The names that come into my head are Cowboys, Colts. So we can tie all these things together. I love seeing what Chris Ballard has done in his end game mode.
Sure.
You know,
do you think Rivers is this part of the romantic, like, let's get Rivers a ring, or are you thinking?
Yeah, well, it gives the team. It's the same thing as why Peyton Manning started on the last Broncos Super Bowl winner, because it gives the team that confidence that if we're in the game at the end, we have a guy who can make the plays to get us over the hump, where they didn't have that with Brissett. And I just love the composition of the offense. I love the composition of the defense.
Yeah,
I
love it. I mean, the Eagles haven't been the same with since Frank Reich left. I mean, he's a perfect aide de camp for. I mean, he's doing a great job as a head coach too. I'm just saying, I miss him very much on the Eagles staff.
Okay, clear your head. Super Bowl pick.
You mean for this season?
For this season, yeah.
Cowboys Chiefs for sure. I mean, that's just how I see it. And I see the Cowboys winning.
Picking the Cowboys.
I see the Cowboys winning. I do. And I see Cowboys fans becoming insufferable after hiding in a cave for the last 20 years.
I know. Cowboys fans. Sorry, and for the true Cowboys fans out there, and there are a lot, because the Cowboys' home turf in the NFL and the U.S. map is big. It's really big. It's the biggest of any team in the. I mean, there's still America's team in some way, or at least like the Mountain Time Zones team or something like that. The Broncos in the north part and the south part goes to the Cowboys. But yeah, I mean, it's and even Mike McCarthy is saying the right things. Like, did we ever think we'd live to see it when it was a plus on your resume as a head coach to say, I like analytics, I like numbers and computers, and I'm going to have.
Yeah, I'm a Mike McCarthy truther. I mean, as you know, I do a lot of coaching analysis for us, and I thought it was a brilliant hire. Caveat, and I probably said this on your show in prior years.
Yeah,
predicting NFL head coaching hires is a maddening. There is no logic to it, and there's no process that will get you the right answer more times than not. But that said, we have to have a reaction, and have to have a take. And I love the McCarthy hire. I think it's a perfect second stands for him. He steps into a ready-made team that most believe talent-wise is ready to compete for a title. And I will say, and I know you on the Audible for years you and Cecil would make fun of some of his play calling. And I don't think it was unfair. I will also say, though, because we saw that the Aaron Rodgers under Matt LaFleur looked an awful lot like the Aaron Rodgers under Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy, in his 20-plus years as a play caller in the NFL, has an incredible history in terms of offensive production. He's one of – in fact, I might do this. I might write an article about this. If you were to line up any play caller that's got at least 10 years experience, he's no worse than third in terms of average offensive production. I mean, he's got to be behind Andy, and I assume he's behind Peyton. And then if you X out, and I guess if you count Belichick, he's not really an offensive guy. But so my point is, he's a top 5 guy in terms of tenured coaches based on raw annual output. I mean, he's that talented of an offensive mind. And I know he got a bad rap for the way that things ended in Green Bay, but it's unfair. He's going to have that team playing, barring injury, of course, at peak efficiency.
And he was humble enough to keep Kellen Moore.
Absolutely. No, that's huge. Absolutely.
He said, I'm the one that needs to learn. He said, I am the one that needs to learn the most this year.
Right. It's not like Kellen Moore was some grizzled old assistant coach that he just wanted to have as a voice in his shoulder. I mean, Kellen Moore is a threat, right? He's a young, hot commodity who, if they have the year I think they're going to have, will leave for a head coaching job by 2021, right? So kudos to McCarthy for having that maturity.
Yeah, and otherwise it's the dream team of assistant coaches. He basically just went out and picked exactly who he wanted. And yeah, with McCarthy, the reason I'll fun on McCarthy is that I do think teams take on the personality of their quarterback and their coach. And because the Packers had this, the clenching, the tightness in the playoff games, I think that's McCarthy. I think that's from McCarthy. I don't think it's from Rodgers. That being said, it's clear that Rodgers is never going to be an extension of a coach quarterback.
No.
And it's clear that it drives LaFleur crazy,
right.
And that's why they took Jordan Love. Not that Jordan Love is going to be that guy either, but that's for another show, another story.
He couldn't beat Boyle out for number 2. I mean,
yeah, he doesn't. I mean, look, this is not the story. This is not the opening chapter to the Jordan Love is going to show everybody that Matt LaFleur was right story. Okay, just the last couple minutes. I want to just talk about this because we were talking about this before we came on the air.
Sure.
Sports, just the role of sports in our life, and we're graybeards now, literally.
See?
Tell me about falling in love with sports. When I say, because we saw John Thompson pass this week. Oh God.
Yeah, I know.
But that takes you back to being a kid, like a wide-eyed kid. What were some of the things, if I say, the moments you fell in love with sports and set you on this path? What comes to mind?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because my dad is he's an outdoorsman. He loves fishing. He loves hunting. It's his passion. He's not a professional sports fan. So little Woodrow didn't grow up, being bombarded with baseball cards and let's go to the game. That was not my life. I didn't really start paying attention to sports until maybe middle school. And it was peer pressure, right? I mean, here I am trying to fit in like all kids. I'd moved to a new town too to boot. So I was the new kid. And, these other guys are talking about the Knicks and the Nets and, the Eagles and the Giants. And I'm thinking, I need to figure this out with the quickness because I want to fit in. And so I just started because we lived closer, even though I'm from New Jersey, we lived in New Jersey because it's a small state sandwiched in between New York and Pennsylvania. You generally grew up rooting for one of either of those spots, unless, the Devils in New Jersey. So I just started rooting for Philly teams kind of just randomly, like, well, I don't have I'm just going to, because that's my local team. Started rooting for them. And then, fast forward to me now, obviously I'm very analytical. So I just started, once that ball got rolling, it became obsessive compulsive. I started buying all the baseball cards, getting sports almanacs, just the data. I wanted to just pull in the data about like all the history and who was good and who wasn't. And I just fell in love with that aspect of it. And then, it probably was, for me, when I look back, I mean, the first athlete that I loved, died to watch every time I could, was Charles Barkley. Believe it or not. Yeah, I know. But I just loved him and his persona, and he was such a fixture with the Sixers, and there was such great energy with the NBA at the time. And then with the Eagles, it was like, I'm going to start watching football so I can talk about it. And I just started watching the Buddy Ryan. Randall Cunningham was really the first team that I felt was like my team, and it would make me crazy. Like I would think like the offense was so predictable, and I always felt like, man, they're just not using Randall. I mean, I always think about like, imagine Randall or Steve McNair in today's NFL. It would be so amazing. But anyway, so those were the teams, man. And then, from there, it just was a ball. People that know me personally know that I have a really weird sports fandom, and that I am an Eagles fan, but that's the only Philly team I still hold an allegiance to. I'm a diehard White Sox fan, and that's because, again, didn't have any like local allegiances. All my friends love the Phillies, but they seem like jackasses to me. Like I thought the guys were assholes. Like I thought. So I fell in love with the White Sox because of Carlton Fisk went there, and I dug him. I had his baseball card, and I thought he was super cool. And then Frank Thomas came along, and to this day, Frank Thomas is my favorite baseball player, and just stuck with them because once you get old enough, you stick with your team. And then I'm a Suns fan because of Barkley. Barkley was the first. Free agent, like that was when we're old enough to say where free agency is like a new thing. It wasn't like that. And so Barkley leaves Philly to go to the Phoenix Suns, and I was distraught. And I was like, well, I'm going to continue to root for Barkley. And as you know, that 2 or 3 year window, they had such an amazing, magical team, so fun to watch. And unfortunately, they lost in the finals to Jordan. They're just part of the asterisk to the Jordan legacy. But Barkley won MVP that year, the year that they went to the finals, So I just have this strange fandom that's evolved, but the roots were Philly. Like the roots, they were all like kernels of Philly. I hated the Phillies, so I moved on. I loved Barkley, so I became a Suns fan, and I just stuck with the Eagles.
And so I've got some different things to sift through here. Yeah, when the Steelers in the late 80s, the end of the Chuck Noll era, were not that exciting. Rod Woodson was starting to take off. I became an Eagles fan. I loved the Buddy Ryan Eagles. Loved that team. Loved that defense. Loved Randall Cunningham.
I cried when Reggie White left as a free agent.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of sad, Andre Waters and some different things in the wake of that amazing team.
Jerome Brown. I wear a Jerome Brown jersey to playoff games.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. Always close to our heart. And I don't know when to say it's the best team to never make it to a Super Bowl, but it's the most memorable team, at least for my money. And plus Buddy Ryan. Got to do a couple of Texas versus Nation games when Buddy Ryan was the coach.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
It was fun. Charles Barkley, I think growing up and remembering Charles Barkley is he was a pain in the ass, but like if he's on your team, he's your pain in the ass.
Correct.
He had old man game. It just should not have been able. Yeah. Speaking of Philadelphia sports, Donovan McNabb. McNabb was on the Syracuse basketball teams, and he was actually a decent rebounder because of the same. It's all in the ass,
That's right.
Rebounding.
The big onion. Yep.
And like you, I agree. Like going down memory lane of the analytical part. The story I like to tell is my stepfather was a professional boxer. and he helped train boxers at this gym out in the woods in Western Pennsylvania. And I would go out there with him, pick like wild strawberries, hang out, raspberries and blackberries, and hang out like I can still, as I tell the story, Jason, remember the smell of a boxing gym. It's like the only thing in the world that has that smell is a boxing gym. And I would have my stats. I would keep hand score on the Pirates games. I'd listen to them at night. And I left my notebook there once, and the man who ran the gym, Buzz Garnick, like if you watched the ESPN Friday Night Fights, chances are Buzz Garnick was like in the corner of one of those fighters some years. He found it, and he said, "I knew this didn't belong to any of the boxers." It had to be yours. But what's interesting, and this is where we could really jump off, and I would agree with this too, and it's changed now, and I'm glad that like all of us are really making an effort to be more inclusive on a gender level, but caring about sports was one of the original gateways to acceptance from your fellow males, you know?
Definitely.
And it could be your, like you said, not specifically your father, but it could be your father, or it could be just a way of feeling validated or feeling like you belong. And then the next thing you know, that true love, that lifelong connection comes out of that first quest to just feel accepted in this group of friends. And you know, we've come a long way, but we have still sports to guide us and each other. It's why it's great to get to do this every year with the football guys, with everybody out there. Thank you, everybody who continues to be part of what we do. Let us be part of what you do. Just be part of each other's lives in a positive way. If we can do that, I'll give out participation trophies for that in this day and age. Jason.
That's right. Be excellent to each other, right?
Yeah, from the leadership of Joe Bryant. So thank you, everybody. It's the week before a lot of fantasy drafts. It's the week before the NFL season starts. So we're excited. Chris Allen yesterday, Jason Wood today, Paul Charchian tomorrow. And well, tomorrow night we have a draft too, don't we? The football.
We certainly
guys,
do. The
staff
OG
draft.
league.
The OG
Yes.
league. You know, I have a Jamal Charles Kansas City jersey I'm looking at
Ooh.
that Cecil sent me to commemorate when he released Charles
Yes.
after week 1, and I rode Charles to a championship. So
I remember that, and then there was the time, I forget the context, but I had screwed. This is before waivers were automated. And I had screwed up waivers, and Gene had put in a claim, and he should have won a player, and I didn't know how to solve it. So I said, you know what, you just get a free pickup right now, no fab. And he picked up Mike Davis, and Mike Davis, not Mike Davis, no, the Broncos running back.
Mike Anderson? No.
Mike Anderson. He picked up Mike Anderson, and Anderson was like a baller the rest of the way, and it was like he got a free pickup. But sometimes it's the way things go.
This is why I'm not a good commissioner, by the way, because I don't know. I tried being the commissioner of our office league for a year, and I'm too much of a pushover. I'm not an authoritarian.
It's all automated now. I mean,
yeah.
like in the sense that it's automated, and we've had so many years of iteration. I think it's much easier now because you make sure that every little thing that you think could happen is detailed in the rules, and there's no surprises. But every now and then something happens, and you just got to roll with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's mainly just about us having a chance to hang out together.
One thing about the Fessel OG League that I love is that even though I'm not one to generally reach for rookies, I just presume I'm getting no rookies in Fessel OG because between you, Cecil, and Waldman, they're all gone instantly.
It's not happening. It's been a fun league, and I always look forward to the draft with the OGs. One of the OFBGs, Jason Wood, always look forward to our visits. Follow him at FBG Wood. You already know that already. Also, if you like comic books, you probably knew about him already too in the podcast. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, everybody, for being part of Football Guys community. Thank you for letting us be part of your life. Always, we like it so much because you're so very classy. I got to make sure to let it breathe.